I used to believe in loyalty. It was the one thing I held on to, the foundation of everything I thought mattered in a relationship. I used to tell myself that bad people should be punished, and that there were still good, loyal women out there. And Lisa was one of the good ones. She was my anchor, the person I trusted most in the world. There was no doubt in my mind that she would never betray me. Not my Lisa, I would think. Dismissing the fears that sometimes crept into my thoughts, I always dreamed of a future together. I imagined growing old with her, sharing every moment, both big and small, until the very end. I wanted a loyal and loving partner by my side, someone to be my best friend through all of life's ups and downs. That dream of happiness, until the end, kept me going, especially during the tough times. I used to watch her smile and feel that everything would be all right, that we could face anything as long as we had each other. Of course, deep down, I had fears. Who doesn't? There was always that tiny voice, that whisper of, what if? What if things weren't as perfect as they seemed? What if one day my worst fears came true? But I always pushed those thoughts away. I didn't want to give in to that fear. I wanted to believe that love was enough, that we were enough. So, I buried my doubts and told myself I was just being paranoid. Lisa wasn't like that. Lisa wouldn't hurt me. And yet there were times when I felt inadequate. I never had as much money or status as I thought I should. I was just an average guy, and sometimes I felt like that wasn't enough. Not for Lisa, not for anyone. I always wondered if I was lacking something, if there was some part of me that wasn't good enough. Those insecurities gnawed at me, but Lisa made me feel like I was worth it. She was my reassurance, my proof that maybe I didn't need all those things to be happy. I believed in the good, in loyalty, in love. I thought our love was strong enough to withstand anything. I thought Lisa was the one person I could always count on, and I held on to that belief like it was my lifeline. I trusted her completely, with no reservations. I never imagined that the bubble I lived in, the one I had built around us, could be so easily shattered. It was an ordinary day. Nothing seemed out of place. I remember getting home from work, feeling the usual tiredness that comes with a long day. I was about to settle in when I heard a knock on the door. It was my neighbor, someone I knew well enough to exchange pleasantries with, but not someone who usually came by unannounced. He looked uncomfortable, hesitant. I could sense something was off even before he spoke. He hesitated, and in that pause, I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. "Look, I don't want to cause trouble, but I think you deserve to know." He started. My heart sank further. He explained that he'd seen Lisa around town with someone else. A man, not just any man either. He described him as well-dressed, driving an expensive car, clearly wealthy. He said he'd seen them together a few times, laughing, holding hands. I remember standing there, just staring at him. The words were hanging in the air, but it felt like my mind couldn't process them. "Lisa? My Lisa?" I forced myself to nod, to thank him for telling me, but I felt like I was outside my own body, watching from a distance as the world I knew started to crack. After he left, I just sat there, replaying everything he said. It was like my brain was stuck on a loop, going over each word, trying to make sense of it. I wanted to deny it, to dismiss it as a misunderstanding. Maybe he saw someone else. Maybe it was just an innocent meeting. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, that sinking feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. It wasn't just the shock of what he said, it was the realization that deep down, I had always feared something like this. I had buried those fears, told myself that Lisa would never do that. But now it felt like those fears were coming to life. I couldn't shake the image of her with someone else. The idea that there was another man giving her what I couldn't, and worse, that maybe she had chosen him over me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the ground beneath me had crumbled away. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, smiling, laughing, but not with me. The doubts, the insecurities, they all came rushing back, and suddenly, the life I thought I had didn't feel real anymore. It felt like I was losing her, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The next few days were a blur. I kept telling myself that maybe the neighbor was wrong. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding, a coincidence. Maybe Lisa was just helping someone with something, and it looked like more than it was. But the doubt was relentless, and it gnawed at me every waking moment. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I wanted to believe that the life I thought we had was real, that Lisa was still the same person I had always known. Every time Lisa would come home, I'd watch her, looking for signs. I'd look for anything that could tell me what was really happening. Any clue that would either confirm or deny what I had been told. Was she smiling less? Was she avoiding eye contact? I'd hear her laugh, and it felt like it was echoing from a place I couldn't reach anymore. I was trying to find reasons to trust her, but my mind was working against me, showing me shadows and doubts everywhere. I wanted to ask her. I wanted to just come out and say it, confront her, demand to know the truth. But every time I thought about it, I froze. What if the neighbor was wrong, and I was about to accuse her of something she hadn't done? What if, by asking the question, I was opening a door that I could never close again? The fear of losing her, the fear of making everything worse, kept me silent. I was terrified of what her answer might be. I found myself going over every moment we'd spent together, searching for signs I might have missed. I replayed our conversations, our shared laughter, the times she said she loved me. Were there hints of something different, something wrong, that I hadn't seen? I questioned everything. Myself, her, our entire relationship. It was exhausting. I felt like I was fighting a war inside my own head, with my heart wanting to believe in her and my mind telling me that something was broken. At night, when Lisa would be asleep beside me, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling that emptiness in my chest growing. I'd listen to her breathing, and it was like she was a million miles away. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, to feel close to her again, but I couldn't. There was this invisible wall between us now, and I felt trapped on the outside, unable to find my way back in. It was like everything I thought I knew was slipping through my fingers, and no matter how hard I tried to hold on, it kept slipping away. I couldn't shake the image of her with someone else. The thought of it haunted me, no matter how much I tried to push it away. It was there when I woke up, there when I went to work, there when I tried to sleep. It felt like I was drowning in my own doubts, and no matter what I did, I couldn't come up for air. I was struggling, not just to accept what I had learned, but to accept that maybe the life I thought we had wasn't real at all. It's hard to say exactly when everything started to unravel. It was a slow, gradual decline, like a frayed rope that finally began to break under the weight of everything left unspoken. I felt it in the little things first. The small routines we used to share, the morning coffee, the quick kiss goodbye, the lazy Sundays on the couch, they started to disappear. Lisa became distant, and I could feel her pulling away from me. The smiles that used to light up her face became fewer, and when she did smile, it felt forced, almost like she was putting on a mask. I tried to hold on. I tried to keep things as normal as possible, thinking that maybe if I just acted like everything was fine, we could get back to what we had before. But the distance between us grew, like a chasm that couldn't be bridged. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd give me short, vague answers. I'd try to make plans for us, dinner, a movie, but she always seemed to have an excuse. Work, errands, something she had to take care of. I told myself it was just a phase, that we'd get through it, but deep down, I knew that something had changed. The laughter disappeared too. We used to joke about everything, our little inside jokes that no one else would understand. But now, the laughter was gone, replaced by silence. And that silence was the worst part. It was heavy, filled with all the things we weren't saying to each other. I wanted to ask her if she was happy, if there was something I could do to fix whatever was broken. But I was too scared of what she might say. I was too scared that the answer would be something I couldn't handle. Every night, I'd lie in bed beside her, feeling the space between us grow wider and wider. I'd reach out sometimes, wanting to hold her, to feel that connection again. But I'd stop myself. I was afraid she'd pull away, and I couldn't bear that kind of rejection. So instead, I just lay there, feeling like a stranger in my own life. It was like I was watching everything fall apart, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I kept telling myself that things would get better, that this was just a rough patch. But with every day that passed, it became clearer that we were losing each other. I could see it in her eyes, the way she avoided looking at me, the way she seemed relieved when she didn't have to be around me. It was like she had already made her choice, and I was just the last one to know. And that realization, that I was losing her and couldn't do anything about it, was the most painful part of all. The worst part of everything that was happening wasn't just losing Lisa, it was losing myself. When I looked in the mirror, I no longer recognized the person staring back. I saw someone tired, worn out, someone who wasn't good enough. My confidence, the sense of who I was, had completely crumbled. I started questioning every part of myself. Why wasn't I enough for her? What did he have that I didn't? Was it the money, the lifestyle, the excitement? The answers weren't there, but the questions haunted me. I replayed every decision I'd made, every time I chose stability over ambition, thinking that being a reliable partner was what mattered most. But now, it felt like I'd made all the wrong choices, like all my sacrifices had meant nothing. I felt small, inadequate. The idea that she had left me for someone who could offer her more wealth and status made me feel like I was a failure as a man. I had built so much of my identity on being a good partner, someone who was kind and loyal, but now all of that seemed meaningless. I even started doubting my ability to be loved. If Lisa, the person who knew me better than anyone, the person I trusted most, could do this to me, then maybe I wasn't worth loving at all. The feeling was heavy, suffocating. It was like there was a black cloud over everything I did, every thought I had. My self-esteem, the confidence that I had spent years building, had been shattered, and in its place was nothing but doubt and fear. I noticed it in the small things. I'd find myself avoiding eye contact with people, keeping my head down, feeling like I had nothing to offer. I started isolating myself, avoiding friends and family because I didn't want them to see how broken I was. The energy I used to have, the drive, the passion for life, it was all gone. I was just going through the motions, barely holding it together. I felt empty, like a shell of the person I used to be. The betrayal had made me question everything about myself. my worth, my value, my identity. I felt lost, like I didn't know who I was anymore. The person I had been, the person who was confident, who believed in love and loyalty, was gone. And I didn't know how to find my way back to him, or if I even could. I was standing in the ruins of everything I thought I was, and I didn't know where to start to rebuild. Eventually, I reached a point where I couldn't keep pretending. The weight of it all was crushing me. The suspicions, the silence, the distance. I knew that if I didn't say something, if I didn't get the truth out in the open, I'd never be able to move forward. The fear of losing her was there, but the fear of living in this limbo, of not knowing, was worse. So, one night after she got home, I decided it was time. I remember my heart pounding, my hands trembling slightly as I spoke her name. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and in that moment, I could see it. There was a flicker of something, guilt, maybe even fear. I took a deep breath and asked the question I had been avoiding for so long. "Is there someone else?" My voice cracked, and I hated how vulnerable I sounded, how small I felt. She didn't answer right away. She looked away, her eyes focusing on the floor, and that silence spoke louder than any words could. My heart sank. I felt a tightness in my chest, and I knew, even before she said anything, what the answer was. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I never meant for it to happen." That was it. The words hung in the air, and it felt like time stopped. I could feel my heart shattering, the pain spreading through every part of me. I asked her about him, who he was, why she did it. She told me it was never supposed to be serious, that she still loved me, that she was confused, but none of it made sense, none of it mattered. All I could feel was the betrayal, the realization that everything we had built together had been torn apart. I remember her crying, apologizing, reaching out to me, but I pulled away. I couldn't let her touch me. Not now. The person I loved, the person I thought I knew, had become a stranger. Her words were like daggers, each one cutting deeper than the last. She said she didn't want to lose me, that she wanted to fix things. But how could we fix this? How could we come back from something like this? I stood there, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and complete devastation. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But instead, I just stood there, silent, the tears burning in my eyes. There was nothing I could say that would change what had happened. Nothing I could do to make it right. Eventually, I just turned away. I told her I needed space, needed time to think. I walked out of the room, my legs feeling weak beneath me. I didn't know what I was going to do, didn't know if I could ever forgive her, if I could ever look at her the same way again. All I knew was that the life I thought I had was gone, and I was left standing in the wreckage, unsure of where to go from here. After that night, I was left with a decision I never thought I'd have to make, a decision that felt impossible. Should I stay and try to rebuild the shattered pieces of our marriage, or should I walk away from the life we had built together? It felt like no matter which way I turned, there was nothing but darkness. I spent sleepless nights, replaying every moment, trying to figure out what to do. It felt like I was at the edge of a cliff, staring into the unknown, with no idea whether I'd fall or fly. Staying meant trying to forgive, trying to trust again. But every time I looked at Lisa, all I could see was her with him. I could hear her laugh, but it wasn't with me, it was with him. The image was seared into my mind, and I couldn't escape it. Could I ever really trust her again? Could I ever look at her without feeling this deep, gnawing pain? I imagined our future, one where I stayed, and it felt like a prison, a life filled with questions, doubts, and the constant fear that it would happen again. But then, there was the thought of leaving. It scared me just as much. If I left, what would I have? She had been my whole life, the person I built my dreams around. Without her, it felt like I had nothing, like I was starting from scratch. The thought of being alone, of having to rebuild my life from the ground up, was terrifying. I didn't know if I was strong enough for that. I didn't know if I could let go of everything we'd shared, all the memories, the love, the moments that made us who we were. The idea of walking away felt like tearing my heart out of my chest. There were moments when I thought I could stay, when I thought maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. Lisa would apologize, tears streaming down her face, promising that it was a mistake, that she still loved me. And for a moment, I'd want to believe her. I'd want to wrap my arms around her and pretend that everything could be okay, that we could fix what was broken. But then, the pain would come rushing back, and I'd remember the betrayal. I'd remember that she chose someone else, even if it was just for a moment. How could I ever forget that? I felt torn in half, one part of me clinging to the love we once had, the other part knowing that staying would mean sacrificing myself, my own happiness, my own peace. It felt like a battle between my heart and my mind, and I didn't know which side to listen to. My heart wanted to forgive, wanted to hold on, but my mind knew that the trust was gone, that the foundation of our marriage had been shattered. Eventually, I realized that I couldn't stay. As much as it broke me, as much as I loved her, I knew that staying would mean living in the shadow of her betrayal, always wondering if I was enough, always questioning if she truly loved me or if she was just staying out of guilt. I couldn't live like that. I couldn't be that person, the person who settled for half-truths and broken promises. I had to choose myself, even if it meant walking away from everything I thought I knew. So, I made my choice. I decided to leave. It wasn't a dramatic moment. It was quiet, almost surreal. I packed my things, each item a reminder of the life I was leaving behind, each one a small heartbreak. Lisa watched, tears streaming down her face, begging me to stay, to give her one more chance. But I knew that if I stayed, I'd be betraying myself. I'd be giving up the chance to find real happiness, the kind that didn't come with doubts and fears. I walked out of that house, my heart heavy, my chest tight. Every step felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind, but I knew it was the only way forward. I didn't know what the future held, didn't know if I'd ever find love again, or if I'd ever feel whole again. But I knew that I had to try. I had to take that leap into the unknown, even if it meant facing my greatest fears. Because staying would mean losing myself. And that was a price I wasn't willing to pay. Leaving Lisa was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But the days that followed were even harder. There was an emptiness, a hollow feeling that made it hard to even get out of bed in the morning. I realized then that I couldn't do it alone. For so long, I'd tried to handle everything by myself, thinking that I had to be strong, that I had to keep it all together. But now, I was falling apart, and I needed help. The first person I reached out to was my best friend, Mark. We hadn't talked much lately. Life had gotten busy, and I'd drifted away from people without even realizing it. I remember sitting in my car outside his house, staring at the front door, wondering if I should even go in. I didn't want to seem weak. didn't want him to see me like this. But eventually, I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and knocked. When Mark opened the door and saw me, it was like he understood everything without me having to say a word. He pulled me into a hug, and in that moment, I felt all the walls I'd been holding up collapse. I broke down right there in his doorway, all the pain and heartbreak spilling out. He didn't say anything. He just let me cry, let me fall apart. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel so alone. We talked for hours that night. I told him everything about Lisa, the affair, the doubts, the decision to leave. He listened, never interrupting, never judging. He just let me speak, let me pour out everything I had been holding inside. And when I was done, he looked at me, his eyes filled with compassion, and said, "You're going to be okay. You're stronger than you know." It was such a simple thing to say, but in that moment, it was exactly what I needed to hear. I also reached out to my family. My mum was heartbroken when she heard what had happened. I remember the way her eyes filled with tears, the way she hugged me so tightly, like she could somehow take the pain away just by holding me. She didn't ask questions, didn't push me for details. She just sat with me, her hand on mine, and reminded me that I was loved. It was something I had forgotten. How much love I still had in my life, even if it wasn't the kind I had lost. My friends started coming by more often. Mark would drag me out of the house, taking me for a walk, to the gym, or just to grab a coffee. It felt awkward at first, like I was trying to pretend that everything was normal when it wasn't. But slowly, those moments with my friends started to bring me back to life. I realized that even though my marriage had ended, my life hadn't. There were still people who cared about me, who wanted to see me happy, and their support became the foundation I needed to start rebuilding. I think one of the most important things I learned during that time was that it was okay to lean on others. I didn't have to go through this alone. I didn't have to be strong every second of every day. My friends and family reminded me that I was still worth something, that I still had value, even if Lisa couldn't see it. They helped me remember who I was before all of this, before the heartbreak, before the doubts. And slowly, day by day, I started to believe in myself again. I wasn't looking for anyone. In fact, after everything that happened, I had convinced myself that love was something I could live without, at least for a long while. I was focused on putting myself back together, figuring out who I was outside of being Lisa's husband. But sometimes, life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. It started in the simplest way. I was at a small coffee shop I had begun frequenting, just trying to take some time for myself and get out of the house. I was sitting there, lost in thought, when a woman walked up to the counter beside me. She had a warm smile, and there was something about her energy that seemed genuine, something that made me feel a little lighter just being near her. We exchanged a few words, small talk about the weather, about how crowded the place was. Her name was Emily. I remember walking out of the coffee shop that day with a smile on my face for the first time in what felt like forever. It wasn't anything big, but it was something. A small reminder that there was still light in the world, still moments that could bring joy, even if they were brief. A few weeks later, I saw her again, and we ended up talking a bit more. One thing led to another, and we exchanged numbers, more out of curiosity than anything else. I was cautious, though. I didn't want to rush into anything, didn't want to open myself up just to get hurt again. But Emily was different. She was patient. We started meeting for coffee, talking about our lives, our pasts, our dreams. There was a warmth to her that put me at ease, a kindness that made me feel like I didn't have to pretend. I could just be myself. No expectations, no pressure. I hadn't realized how much I had been craving that, just the ability to be myself without fear of judgment. The more we talked, the more I found myself opening up. I told her about Lisa, about what had happened, about the doubts and insecurities that still lingered. I expected her to pull away, to see me as damaged or broken. But she didn't. She listened, her eyes full of understanding, and she told me that she admired my strength. It was the first time anyone had said that to me, and it touched something deep inside me, something that had been broken for so long. Slowly, I began to trust her. It wasn't easy. Every time I felt myself getting close to her, there was a voice in the back of my mind telling me to be careful, that I couldn't go through that kind of pain again. But Emily never pushed. She let me take my time, and with each passing day, I found myself letting go of the fears that had held me back. She made me believe that maybe not everyone would hurt me, that maybe I was worthy of love just as I was. There was a moment when I knew I was starting to fall for her. We were at a small park, sitting on a bench, just watching the world go by. She looked at me, her eyes soft and full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, genuine care. She reached over, taking my hand in hers, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. I let myself feel it, let myself believe that maybe I could be happy again, that maybe love wasn't something to be feared. Emily helped me see that the past didn't have to define me. She helped me rebuild the trust that had been shattered, piece by piece, not by promising that everything would always be perfect, but by being there, by showing up, by caring in a way that felt real. And in that, I found hope again. Hope that love could be simple, that it could be kind, and that maybe, just maybe, I could have a future filled with happiness. I never thought I'd find myself here, feeling this sense of happiness that I had long since given up on. I had resigned myself to the idea that maybe happiness wasn't in the cards for me, that what I lost with Lisa had taken away my capacity for joy. But being with Emily, something changed. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't like a light switch. It was gradual, like waking up after a long, dark sleep, realizing that maybe there was still something beautiful waiting for me. Our relationship wasn't like anything I'd had before. It wasn't about grand gestures or trying to prove anything to each other. It was about the small moments, the simple things that, in the end, mattered most. It was the way she'd look at me, her eyes filled with warmth and care, the way she'd laugh at my jokes, even the dumb ones. It was how she'd reach for my hand when we walked, a small gesture that said, "I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." There was a moment that really stood out to me, one that made me realize I was in love again. We were sitting in my living room, a quiet evening with no plans, just a movie on in the background. Emily had her head resting on my shoulder, and I could hear her steady breathing. It was such a simple moment, and yet I felt this overwhelming sense of peace, a kind of contentment that I hadn't felt in so long. It was then that I knew I was happy, truly happy. And it wasn't because I was trying to fill a void or escape my past. It was because, for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. Being with Emily taught me that love doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be filled with doubts, fears, or conditions. It can be kind. It can be understanding. I didn't have to be anything other than myself, and that was enough. She never tried to change me or make me feel like I had to prove myself. She saw me for who I was, scars and all. And she loved me anyway. That was the kind of love I had always wanted. The kind that doesn't demand perfection, but instead finds beauty in the imperfections. With Emily, I found a new kind of happiness, one that wasn't based on status or money or what I could provide. It was based on the connection we shared, the way we made each other feel. It was in the quiet mornings we spent together, drinking coffee and talking about nothing in particular. It was in the spontaneous road trips to nowhere, just for the fun of it. It was in the moments when she'd look at me, and I knew, without a doubt, that she loved me for who I was, not for what I could give her. I realized then that happiness was never about chasing something unattainable. It was about appreciating what was right in front of me. It was about choosing love, choosing to let go of the past, choosing to believe in the possibility of a future that was different but still beautiful. Emily helped me see that what I thought I had lost forever was still there. It was just waiting for me to be ready to embrace it. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know where life will take us, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid of the unknown. I'm excited. I'm hopeful. Because I know that whatever happens, I'm not alone. I have someone by my side who loves me, who sees me, and who makes every day a little brighter. And that, more than anything, is enough. It's more than I ever thought I'd find again. It's happiness, pure and simple, and I'm finally ready to accept it. As I sit here now, looking back on everything that happened, I realize just how far I've come. It's strange how life works, how the moments that break us are the very ones that lead us to something better. When Lisa left, I thought my world had ended. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered, that I'd never find my way back to happiness. But now, I see that what I lost wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of something new. I used to believe that bad people should be punished, that betrayal meant there could be no forgiveness. But as time passed, I realized that holding on to anger, holding on to resentment, was only hurting me. It kept me tied to the past, kept me from moving forward. I don't think I'll ever forget what happened, but I've learned to let go of the bitterness. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone's actions. It's about setting myself free. My beliefs have changed. I no longer see life in such black and white terms. I no longer think that loyalty is a guarantee, or that people are only good or bad. Life is messy, people are flawed, and sometimes we make choices that hurt others. I've learned to accept that, to understand that what happened wasn't because I wasn't enough. It was about her choices, her journey, and mine had to continue, even without her. Finding Emily has shown me that love isn't about perfection. It's about being willing to show up, to be vulnerable, to take risks even when you're scared. She's helped me see that happiness doesn't come from what you have or what you can offer materially. It comes from the connections you make, from the kindness you show, from the small, everyday moments that make life worth living. I've closed the loop on my past, not by forgetting it, but by learning from it. I've learned that I am stronger than I thought, that I am capable of rebuilding even after everything falls apart. I've learned that I am worthy of love, not because of what I can give, but because of who I am. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its setbacks, but I wouldn't change it, because it led me here, to a place where I can finally say that I am happy, that I am at peace. I know there will be challenges ahead. Life is never without its ups and downs, but I also know that I have the strength to face whatever comes, and I have someone by my side who loves me for who I am. The past no longer defines me. It's a part of my story, yes, but it's not the whole story. And as I look to the future, I do so with hope, with love, and with the belief that whatever happens, I'll be okay. Because I've made it through the darkest moments, and I've come out the other side stronger, more open, and more grateful for the love I've found. For the first time in a long time, I feel free. Free from the weight of what happened, free from the doubts and fears that once held me back. I'm ready for whatever comes next, and I'm ready to live my life fully, without looking back. And that, to me, is the greatest victory of all.